What's up, YouTube? Today I actually have something I want to talk about, which means I don't have to make voices like some campfire cowboy telling you a story about, growing stronger in the face of adversity or whatever other nonsense I typically put over this invasion footage, which, I'll be honest, I love doing that. But today I actually have something normal and regular to talk about. Lords of the Fallen just came out. And before the game came out, a lot of people were asking me if I was interested in the game because, it's like a Souls-like. And this is not a Lords of the Fallen thing. It's pretty much for any Souls-like. If you're looking for a game that is like Elden Ring or like Dark Souls or whatever, try it out. I don't know. Watch somebody. Read a review. But I personally, I am not looking for a game that is like these games. So I typically don't have a lot of interest in them. And then very, very rarely, one of these games will add the invasion mechanic into, what they're doing, or PvP in general. And then people ask if I am, excited or curious about what they're going to do with the online. Like if I'm getting hype about doing invasions in these other games. And the answer to that is always no, I'm not. This is not a knock on the studios, and it's not even especially high praise from software. It's really, I don't think it's really praise at all. It's more just a factual accounting of what has happened. So Lords of the Fallen came out, and I've been watching people do invasions in the game, and a lot of people are not happy with the way that the invasions and the PvP works in Lords of the Fallen, and a lot of it is, it's on the gamers for having expectations about these things and just not thinking about this logically at all. More than a decade ago, From Software introduced this invasion mechanic in Demon Souls, and it was basically like, if you die in Demon Souls, you lose half of your hit points. They're just gone. You're in soul form, and the only way to get those hit points back, there's a ring that offsets a little bit of the punishment, but the only way to get those hit points back is to go back into body form. And one of the quickest ways to get back into body form is to invade another player and kill them, or help another player defeat a boss. And it's just sort of this moral conundrum of what would be better for you, what would be faster and easier. Do you want to help people, or do you want to oppose them in an effort to get yourself stronger, right? And that's, at the end of the day, what will be remembered about the invasion mechanic as a whole when it comes to From Software. For better or worse, it hasn't really changed. Things are pretty much the same as they were. They're a little different, but that's how the mechanic will be remembered by the majority of people who don't spend all day, every day, thinking about and doing invasions in these games. So when Demon Souls introduced invasions, it created this sort of PvP community, this group of people who were interested in the mechanic for one of two reasons. Either one, they just wanted to fight other players and thought it was cool, or two, they just enjoyed the idea of the invasion mechanic. I fall into that second group. I just enjoy the idea of the invasion mechanic. I just think it rules. I love it to death. But there's always new people joining the PvP community, and a lot of them join just, hey, I just want to fight other players, and I don't think that they necessarily understand the other half, the other group of players, and vice versa. There's another, there's that opposite group of people who just want to, do invasions and just enjoy this mechanic, and they don't really care about getting in too deep with, the actual one versus one, PvP type thing. That's not what they're in it for. And these two, when you first get into the PvP, you don't necessarily understand that there's this whole other group of people out there who are doing it for a different reason than you are. Alright, so the point is, that when this PvP community starts up, immediately everybody wants something better, right? It's just the human condition, right? And so Demon Souls does this, and people do fight clubs and they invade, whatever. And going back to then, one of the things that people complained about was latency, and the way From Software handles latency. Because these are not fighting games, these are not even really true multiplayer games. They are broadly focused around the single-player experience. From Software doesn't bother implementing, servers or whatever, or a net code with like fighting game tier net code or whatever. It's gotten better over the years, but it's still obviously not like the very first thing they worry about when they are making one of these games that you can spend hundreds of hours in just as a single player experience, making different builds and etc., etc. It's just not something that they prioritize. So the way that they handle latency is an effect of the fact that the game's connection is peer-to-peer, meaning my console is talking to your console, and the distance between our two consoles is what determines our latency. How long it takes your console to tell my console that something happened. And that's distance and the stability of our internet. It doesn't necessarily matter if you have better internet or not. It just matters that your internet is stable. So, for example, you might fight someone who's on like a fiber connection and have more issues fighting them than you do fighting somebody who's playing with, like a standard, 35 down, 5 up connection speed. And that might be because the fiber, let's say the fiber connection is on Wi-Fi. Okay, well, it's less stable than the 30 down, 5 up, right? That's what really matters. Having more internet isn't going to make the connections better than just having stable internet is going to make the connections better. So latency is, my screen is saying one thing and your screen is saying another thing. And what does the game do in that sort of situation? So you might hear people in the PvP community talk about phantom range. I swear to God, this is going somewhere. I know a lot of you are like, bro, I know all of this. I've been knowing all of this. And that's fine, but I have to explain it for the people who don't know. So phantom range is essentially this term that was coined where people say, oh, that weapon is longer than it looks in PvP. It has phantom range. It will hit you even though it didn't actually hit you. You'll take damage even though it didn't actually hit you. And they call that phantom range. What that really is latency. That's really my console talking to your console, and my console says you weren't in iframes, and on my screen you were within hitting range. And so my weapon is going to hit you, despite the fact that your console says you were not in range to be hit. And that's just the nature of peer-to-peer connections and people living, not right on top of each other. So like a European to American connection, or South America to North America, whatever. The more distance that information has to travel, the more latency that there's going to be. The more phantom range weapons are going to have. So sometimes it feels like you're standing outside of a weapon's range and you get hit by it anyway. That's just the way From Software has done it since Demon Souls. Lords of the Fallen has done it differently, and this is where people are not happy. So the way Lords of the Fallen handles it is if you get hit on their screen, but not on yours, and you're not in iframes, you just get teleported to where you were on their screen. And so you can imagine that this happens over and over again in a very short span of time. Over the course of 2 seconds, you get teleported 3 times. You can imagine how frustrating that is. And how confusing it is for someone who doesn't know all of this stuff. Right? And so people are, you know, not happy about it. So basically, rather than just having you get hit at a range outside of the weapon's standard range, phantom range, right? Rather than have phantom range, the game is just physically moving your character back to where they were on the other player's screen when they got hit. Okay, so people are understandably not digging that, and I understand. And again, I'm not here to, like, you know, crap on the game or anything like that. But I would like to point out that you know, like, Elden Ring is attempt number 6 by From Software at doing invasions. You know, you had Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and now Elden Ring. So this is their 6th time doing it. And you could actually, like, draw a line back even further to the Armored Core games, which is probably where this all started anyway. Those Armored Core games had connections so that players could fight each other in the arena. And so From Software already had that infrastructure in place for their game to be online and for players to be able to take their builds and go up against other players. That was something that already existed because of Armored Core. And they just gave it to Demon Souls and gave it, you know, this new, you know, coat of paint. It's invasions now. That's what we're doing. It's not just going into an arena. So they've had, like, these 6 chances to do this. And for better or worse, you kind of know what to expect when it comes to From Software doing an invasion mechanic. So when people ask me, as they always do, are you excited this game's going to have invasions in it? You know, this new studio is trying out, or, you know, invasions. Are you excited about it? The answer is no, I'm not, because I have no idea what they are going to do to try and deal with, you know, all of these problems that arise, you know, regarding latency and all this other stuff. And that kind of brings me to this next point that I want to make, which is that invasions, this mechanic, is risky. And this is one of the things, like I said, I'm not here to crap on Lords of the Fallen. Regardless of whether or not the invasions are terrible and awful, you know, like, it should at least be noted that, you know, they tried. So if going forward that studio develops another game, they will already have that infrastructure there for their next attempt at, you know, making this mechanic work. And also, I would point out that, you know, it would be unfair to, like, obviously there's going to be, like, patches to the game, I assume, and so a lot of stuff will change. Now, I'm not sure necessarily that you can change the way you have the netcode set up as far as, like, connections go. I'm not sure that that's something that you can just, you know, fix. Maybe it is, but I would not expect it to be. I would rein in my expectations, but going forward, like, you know, it will just hopefully get better. It would be hard to make it worse once you have put that infrastructure down. And that's the point I wanted to make, is that, like, it's risky. It's risky to include this mechanic in your game if you don't already have the infrastructure there to do it. And that's at least worth saying, you know, hey, they tried. Think about when you make a game, right? Think about how expensive it is. You have to, you know, you have to hire all of these people from all over the place. You know, you need artists. You need people to code the game. You need, you know, producers. You need writers. You need voice actors. You need musicians. You know, you've got all this stuff that has to be taken care of. And keep in mind, the goal of this is to profit. The goal of this is to make money. And so you have, you know, this publisher or whoever is paying you to make this game. They expect this game to turn around and sell more and make more money than it cost for them to create the game. So the idea that now you're going to add a whole new team, or take people that are already on your team and you're going to tell them now, like, hey, you're going to be doing the online stuff. This is like a whole different thing now. It's a whole new category of spending money that we have to worry about. And it's more money that we have to return to these people who are investing in our game expecting us to turn a profit. That's a risky thing to do. And this is the thing that, like, no one talks about for whatever reason. People all the time, you know, they say, like, I wish other studios would do invasions because, you know, if From Software had competition, they would have to get better at doing invasions. And, like, I understand what you're getting at, but, like, in theory, but, like, in practice, that's not the way anything works at all. That's, like, such a reductive, sort of simplistic view of what's actually happening. People expect that these studios that are trying to add invasions into their game, they expect that Elden Ring is going to be their floor. That's their base, because they're just building off of the mechanic, right? But that's not how anything works. Lords of the Fallen's creators, they don't suddenly have access to From Software's code and From Software's experience, a decade's plus worth of doing this mechanic. They have to start from their own bottom. They have to start at the start. They don't get to cut in line. And I'm ranting, but while I'm ranting, I would also like to rant about this. A lot of times people will say, people who want invasions to be better, they'll say, oh, From Software doesn't care about invasions, which is just fundamentally and demonstrably not true, because if they didn't, they just wouldn't put it in the game anymore, and they would save themselves a lot of money and trouble and time, right? The fact that these things still exist in the game means that they obviously still care about it in some way. But it is money and time and risk and all this other stuff. And other companies that are going to go forward and try and replicate this mechanic, they don't get to build on it. They have to start from their own bottom. They don't get to just immediately know everything that From Software is going to know. So, like, while they might not have turned out the way you wanted them to, going forward, just, like, rein in your expectations and understand that, like, you have to start somewhere, and that's what they're doing. I personally, like I said, I'm not setting out to shit on this game. I don't care. But seeing everybody talk about it has made me, you know, want to talk about it. And so I have. And you have listened to it. And I hope that you've enjoyed it. And maybe enjoyed the invasions that I was showing off as well. I appreciate y'all watching. And I thank you for your time. And I will see you in the next video, where I will talk like a campfire cowboy about overcoming adversity. Until then, later y'all.